By the quiet riverside, a solitary black woman walked slowly, a bundle of firewood on her shoulder, each step heavy with the burden of silence and survival. Then a scream. A white boy, no older than 10, was struggling in the rushing water. Without a second thought, she dove in. That act of courage became the beginning of a new lifetime, of love, of sacrifice. Against all odds, and despite the whispers of prejudice, she raised the boy as her own, and years later that same boy came back with something no one dared dream. The river shimmered beneath the late afternoon sun, its golden surface breaking gently around smooth stones and drifting leaves. The air smelled of damp earth and moss, tinged faintly with the warmth of wood smoke from the distant village. Birds chirped in the treetops, and somewhere upstream a frog croaked lazily, as if even it felt the hush of the coming dusk. Clara Lewis adjusted the weight of the basket on her hip, wiping the sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. Her arms ached, her feet throbbed, but her spirit, quiet, enduring, was steady. The path home curved close to the riverbank, where tall grass bent with the breeze and sunlight spilled like honey through the trees. The village behind her was small and quiet, where the struggles of daily life never made the news, and kindness was currency that held the community together. She didn't expect the scream. It was thin at first, sharp, fragile. A child's cry breaking the stillness like a stone through glass. Clara froze. Then came the frantic splash of water, the gurgled gasps of someone too small to fight a current too strong. Her eyes darted toward the river. There, midstream, a boy no older than 7, flailing helplessly, his pale arms thrashing against the pull of the water, his head dipping under once, twice. He surfaced just long enough to cry out again, and Clara didn't think. She didn't have to. The basket hit the ground with a thud. Her shawl came off in one swift motion. She ran, heart pounding, and dove. The river was colder than she expected, a slap against her skin, but she pushed forward, kicking hard, arms cutting through the water with the kind of strength born from necessity, not training. She reached him just as he slipped beneath the surface again. Her fingers found his wrist, then his shoulder, and she pulled him up. He coughed, sputtered, but his face was white with panic, his lips blue. Clara wrapped one arm around his narrow chest and kicked for the shore, gritting her teeth as the current fought to steal them both away. When they reached the bank, she dragged him onto the mud and rolled him gently onto his side. Water poured from his mouth, his small body heaving with each breath. He coughed again, eyes wide, terrified, gripping at the hem of her skirt as if she might vanish like a dream. "You're safe now," she whispered, pressing the damp shawl around his shoulders. "You hear me? You're safe." He didn't answer, just clung to her, trembling. Clara pulled him close, rocking him slightly, shielding him with her own body from the evening chill. Her skin was dark, lined with sun and years of labor. His skin was pale, too pale, and though Clara didn't name it out loud, didn't speak the thought that passed through her mind, she felt it in the stares that would come, in the questions people would ask. What was she doing with a white child in her arms? She didn't care, not now, not while his small hands were still shaking, and his life had almost been taken by a river that gave no thought to the color of their skin. She stood, lifting the boy gently into her arms. He was light, soaked through and shivering, his cheek pressed against her shoulder. Clara began the walk back to her home, not yet knowing his name, not yet knowing what would come of this moment. All she knew was this: she had pulled a child from the edge of death, and for now that was enough. And behind them, the river kept flowing, silent, eternal, bearing witness. Clara's cottage sat at the edge of the village, modest and worn, with ivy climbing its wooden walls and a crooked chimney that coughed smoke when the wind was right. She laid the boy, still soaked, still trembling, on a pile of old quilts beside the hearth. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm orange glow that danced across the floorboards. His lips had begun to lose their blue, but his eyes remained wide and watchful, as if afraid that safety was only a trick of the light. Clara moved with quiet purpose, heating a pot of broth, wringing water from his clothes, placing dry socks near the hearth's edge. He didn't speak, not for hours, not even when she offered soup, which he ate slowly, eyes flicking to her face between each cautious sip. "You don't have to say anything," she said gently, setting down the spoon. "But you're going to need a name if I'm to talk to you." He blinked, paused, then whispered, "Nathan." It barely escaped his lips. He didn't offer a last name. Clara didn't push. Over the next few days she learned what he could remember, small fragments like bits of glass in the mud. His parents, he said, didn't live together anymore. His mom had moved far away. His dad had a new baby. He was left with his aunt and uncle who rarely spoke to him unless it was to scold. He had wandered down to the river alone, chasing dragonflies. "Did they come looking for you?" Clara asked softly, though she already feared the answer. Nathan shook his head. "I don't think they noticed." Clara sat still for a long time that night. Her hands, cracked from years of labor, rested in her lap. Outside, crickets sang beneath a sky of bruised violet. She went to the village council the next day. She spoke to the preacher, the midwife, even the constable. She explained the boy's situation, said she'd found him half drowned and alone, but no one knew of a missing child. No family came forward. When she wrote a letter to the district office and received no reply, Clara understood something she hadn't wanted to admit. No one was coming for him. The boy stayed, at first in the small room that once belonged to Clara's late mother, and then slowly over the weeks in every part of Clara's world. He helped gather wood, fed the chickens, sat with her on the porch at dusk. Still, she kept it quiet. Not hidden, but quiet. In a town like theirs, it wasn't just rare to see a black woman caring for a white boy. It was unnatural in the eyes of some, and there were stares. One woman at the market narrowed her eyes and muttered under her breath, "Ain't your kind supposed to know better than taking in strays that don't match?" Clara met that gaze without blinking. "Child nearly drowned," she said. "Color don't matter when they're breathing through river water." But the comment stuck with her longer than she wanted to admit. That night, as Nathan slept, curled beneath the same shawl she had wrapped him in, Clara stared into the flames of her fireplace and asked herself the question no one else had dared to ask. What would happen if someone did come knocking? If the law came, papers in hand, and demanded the boy be returned to kin who had let him walk to death's edge without a backward glance? She didn't know. But what she did know, what she felt deep in the marrow of her bones, was that no one else had pulled him from that water. No one else had sat with him through the fever, the fear, the silence. And until someone could prove they loved him more than she did, he wasn't going anywhere. The fire popped. Outside, the river ran dark and unseen, but Clara could still hear its voice in her memory. The moment it had nearly swallowed a child whole. She reached down, adjusted the shawl over Nathan's shoulder and whispered, more to herself than anyone else, "You're safe, and I'm right here." The seasons turned slowly, like pages in a book no one was in a hurry to finish. Spring melted into summer, then fell into crisp autumn winds, and still Nathan stayed. By then the village had grown used to seeing the boy at Clara's side, carrying bundles of wood, helping wash jars for canning, trailing behind her at the market with quiet steps and eyes that missed nothing. He didn't talk much around others, but with Clara he opened like a window just slightly cracked. He was curious, quick to learn, and surprisingly thoughtful for a boy so young. Clara taught him how to read using her late father's worn Bible, then later traded preserves for a stack of children's books from the midwife's cousin. He devoured them all. By the time Nathan turned 10, he could read faster than Clara herself. He asked questions she didn't always have answers to, about stars, about birds, about why some people were poor and others rich, and why the folks at the feed store never looked her in the eye when she spoke. Clara answered what she could, the rest she let him find in the books. Their life was simple, but not without sacrifice. Clara took extra laundry work. She skipped suppers some nights, pretending she wasn't hungry just so he could have seconds. She stitched his clothes by hand, made him a coat from an old blanket when winter came hard, but she never once made him feel like a burden. That was her gift, making even the smallest space feel enough. Still, there were limits the village couldn't stretch. The school only went through 5th grade. The teacher, a soft-spoken man named Mr. Ellis, pulled Clara aside one afternoon after church. "He's ahead of the others," he said gently. "Reads like a boy twice his age. I'd hate to see that go to waste." Clara listened, quiet, her hands folded in front of her. "There's a scholarship," Mr. Ellis added, "in the city, for gifted students from rural areas. I know a woman at the board. She owes me a favor." Clara didn't answer right away. That night she sat on the porch alone, watching Nathan chase fireflies with a glass jar and that too big coat flapping around his knees. He laughed when he caught one, held it up like treasure, like light belonged in his hands. And just like that, she knew. It took weeks to prepare. Mr. Ellis helped with the paperwork, smoothed out the legal questions with language that bent the truth without breaking it. A friend of Clara's, Miss Trudy, who ran a diner in the city, agreed to be his guardian in name, though Clara would still write, still send what little she could. Nathan didn't want to go, not at first. "I can learn here," he said. "I don't want to leave you," Clara smiled, brushing hair from his eyes. "You got more in you than this town can hold," she said. "Don't let that go to waste, 'cause you're scared." The morning he left, Clara packed his bag with a notebook, a pencil, a wrapped biscuit, and the old brown shawl, the same one she had wrapped around him the day she pulled him from the river. "It smells like home," he whispered. Clara pressed it into his arms. "Then keep it close," she said. "And remember who you are." When the bus pulled away, she stood alone at the edge of the road, the dust settling around her boots. Her arms ached with absence, but deep down, beneath the silence, there was something else, something fierce and bright. It wasn't pride exactly. It was hope. And hope, she knew, was worth any hunger, any loneliness, any empty room. Because she hadn't just saved a life that day by the river. She had given it a future. The city was louder than Nathan had imagined. Horns that never stopped honking, voices overlapping on crowded sidewalks, lights that blinked all night long as if the world never wanted to sleep. At first he felt swallowed by it. A small voice in a canyon of noise. Miss Trudy was kind but busy, always moving between the diner and home, her life a rhythm Nathan tried not to interrupt. He slept on a cot in the corner of her back room, the brown shawl folded neatly under his pillow. Some nights he'd hold it to his face and breathe in the faint scent of wood smoke and wildflowers, pretending it still carried the warmth of Clara's arms. School wasn't hard because of the work. He managed the books and math. It was the way people looked at him, not poor enough to pity, not polished enough to belong. More than once he heard the word charity case whispered when he passed. One teacher, a sharp-tongued woman with cold eyes, once asked in front of the whole class, "And just who exactly are you staying with, Nathan? You do have guardians, don't you?" He nodded, cheeks burning, but the heat had nothing to do with shame. It was the sting of being reminded that even when he did everything right, someone would still see him as less. So he learned to be invisible. He studied late, often past midnight, under the yellow glow of a borrowed desk lamp. He took a part-time job delivering groceries after class, saving every dollar. He wrote Clara every week, about the classes, the books, the noise, and the nights he nearly gave up. He told her about the noise, the loneliness, the nights he wanted to quit and come home, and always she wrote back. Her handwriting slanted and steady, her words like warm bread. "You are stronger than you think, baby. The river didn't take you, and neither will this city." He earned scholarships, studied policy and business, and grew into someone no one had expected him to become. And through it all he carried Clara with him, in his choices, in his values, in the way he refused to step over those still fighting upstream. But success didn't come easy. There were interviews where his name earned him a smile, but his voice changed it to suspicion. There were moments he saw people's eyes flick to his worn shoes, or hesitate when he mentioned growing up in a village no one's ever heard of. And one day, during a presentation in a corporate boardroom, a partner muttered under his breath, thinking Nathan couldn't hear, "Kid talks pretty good for a foster case." That moment stuck. It didn't break him, but it sharpened him. He worked harder, built connections, turned every insult into fuel. By 30, Nathan Cole was no longer just a name in the room. He was the one calling meetings, the one signing checks. He started his own firm, lean, ethical, driven. Its mission was simple: fund opportunity for kids like him, build programs in rural towns, sponsor young minds no one else saw. And through every milestone, every late-night strategy session, every investor pitch, there was a single photo on his desk. Clara, standing in front of her cottage, arms crossed, smile half hidden beneath her hat. And next to it, a folded square of fabric, worn thin at the edges, the brown shawl. Because no matter how far the city pulled him, no matter how sharp he became to survive it, that river still ran through him, and so did she. The day Nathan returned to the village, the road felt smaller now. The trees leaned like old friends, and the air hummed with memories. The tires of his rented car crunched over gravel as he slowed near the old wooden sign, still chipped at the corners, still painted by hand. Time had moved forward, but here things held on. The same crooked fences, the same garden gates with squeaky hinges, the same hush in the air that seemed to honor the quiet lives lived beneath it. And then, at the end of the lane, stood the cottage. It was smaller than his memory, or maybe he had just outgrown the boy's eyes he used to see it through. Smoke curled from the chimney. A familiar woven rug hung over the porch rail to dry. He parked the car and stepped out, heart hammering in a way no boardroom had ever stirred. And then the door creaked open. Clara stood there, older, slower, but unmistakably her. Her hands, once steady and strong, now trembled slightly as she held the screen door open, eyes blinking against the afternoon sun. For a second, she didn't move, didn't speak. Then she said his name, low and soft, as if testing whether it could really be him. "Nathan?" He crossed the yard in 3 long strides and folded into her arms. Her embrace hadn't changed. It still wrapped around him like it had that night by the river, like it had every time he'd written home and imagined her reading his words aloud by the fire. He held her tight, afraid to speak, afraid he might fall apart if he did. And she just said, "You came back," like she'd known he would, even if she never expected when. Inside, the house smelled of dried herbs and warm dust. The table was set for one. A kettle hissed softly on the stove. Nathan sat across from her, watching how she moved a little slower now, how she paused to catch her breath. He told her everything, not in one breath, but in pieces. About the city, the nights he wanted to quit, the times he remembered her words and kept going. About the firm, the programs, the kids. She listened, nodding, her eyes shining with unshed tears that caught in the corners and refused to fall. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small folded cloth. It was worn thin, edges frayed, but Clara recognized it instantly. Her fingers touched it like a prayer. "You kept it?" she whispered. He nodded. "It got me through more than you know." He stood, offered her his hand, and said, "I want to show you something." They drove past the winding fields, past the church and the schoolyard, until they reached a small hill near the river's bend. A house stood on the hill, modern, warm, with wide windows and sunflowers swaying in the breeze. Clara stared, confused. Nathan turned the key in her hand. "It's yours," he said quietly. "You won't have to work anymore. You won't have to worry about the cold, or the roof leaking, or anything." She looked at him, eyes wide, hand to her mouth, as if the breath had been stolen right from her chest. "Nathan, I never—" But he shook his head gently. "You gave me everything. This is just me catching up." He led her around back where a modest building stood next to the house. A school. Clean walls, bright windows, a carved sign above the door that read, "Clara Lewis Learning Center." "So no child here," he said, "ever has to wonder if their life is worth something. So they'll know it is, because someone believed in them." The moment hung heavy between them, and Clara finally let the tears fall. She reached up, cupped his cheek with her hand, and smiled the kind of smile that could crack stone. "You were never mine by blood," she said, "but you've always been mine by heart." And in that golden hour, with the river singing low in the distance, Nathan realized something he hadn't dared to name until now. He had come home, not just to the place, but to the beginning of everything that had made him who he was. The opening of the school brought the village to life in a way it hadn't known in years. Children ran through the halls with wide eyes and sharpened pencils, their voices echoing with laughter and the kind of questions that meant they believed the world might actually listen. Nathan stood in the doorway most mornings, offering a nod, a high five, a word of encouragement. And Clara, she watched it all from her garden, wrapped in a warm shawl, a new one Nathan had given her, though the old brown cloth still rested on a shelf inside, folded carefully like scripture. She never said much about the school's name, but the first time she walked past the sign that bore it, she reached out and traced the letters with the tips of her fingers, as if confirming they were real. One afternoon, while Nathan was helping paint the benches beneath the oak trees behind the center, a boy approached, maybe 10, with grass-stained knees and a serious expression that didn't quite match his age. He held a wrinkled notebook to his chest and looked up with wide, curious eyes. "Mr. Cole," he said, "is it true you weren't born rich?" Nathan set down the brush, smiled. "Very true." The boy hesitated. "Is it true you used to live here and didn't have a daddy around?" Nathan nodded, more slowly this time. "That's true, too." The boy chewed his lip, then said, almost in a whisper, "I want to be like you." Something caught in Nathan's chest. It wasn't pride. It was something heavier, something deeper. He knelt, eye level with the boy. "Then start by being kind," he said, "even when it's hard, especially when no one's watching. That's where it begins." As the sun lowered behind the trees, casting long shadows over the grass, Nathan walked home along the path by the river. It glittered like it always had, like the day Clara had pulled him from its current, breathless and shaking, too small to understand what had been given to him. He paused at the edge, crouched, and let his fingers trail through the cool water. For a moment, he closed his eyes. The world felt still. He thought of every night he had spent, hungry, tired, invisible. He thought of the letters he'd written in the dark, the aching silence of homes that weren't really home. And then he thought of Clara, of her hands, her voice, the unshakable love that had filled the spaces the world left empty. She had saved him. Not with money, not with grand speeches, but with presence, with patience, with faith. And now here he was, a man no one had expected, in a place where it had all begun, watching that same river roll forward, carrying not just memory, but possibility. Back at the house, Clara sat on the porch, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, eyes half closed in the warm breeze. Nathan joined her, no words needed. The silence between them was full of years, of sacrifice, of gratitude that ran deeper than blood. And just before the sun dipped below the trees, Nathan turned to her and said, "You didn't just give me a life. You gave me a reason to live it well." Clara smiled, slow and steady, and reached for his hand. In that moment, under a sky painted in gold, with the river murmuring softly in the distance and laughter rising from the schoolyard, Nathan understood what legacy truly meant. Not buildings, not wealth, but love. Quiet, unwavering, and given freely to someone the world had forgotten. And somewhere beyond the trees another child was watching, listening, waiting, because kindness, once planted, always finds a way to grow. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.